3E. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out themichaeldukesshow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator. Hello, good morning. Welcome to Tuesday. It is unfathomable. That's right. It is just another beautiful day in paradise here as we get ready to crack into it, the Michael Dukes Show. 6 to 8 a.m. every morning here on your radio dial, Monday through Friday. We dive into it. We talk about the things. We take care of stuff. We do everything that we need to do to try and entertain, educate, and enlighten. The 3 E's, as we like to call them. We appreciate you guys coming in and being part of it. You are officially members now. Pat yourself on the back. I know that's hard. You can't get my arm back there. Pat yourself on the back. You are all members of the 6 o'clock club this morning. And we appreciate you coming in and being part of that as well. Speaking of 6 o'clock club, if you'd like to show your rep yourself, if you'd like to brag, you should be able to find some 6 o'clock club mugs pretty much wherever you are. If you're up in Fairbanks, you can go to Frontier Outfitters. I think they've got a few. If you're down in Soldotna, you can go by Ammo Can Coffee. If you're down in Homer, you can go to Captain's Coffee. I believe they still have a few of those hanging around. And so if you've missed it, go ahead and go check it out. And no, I'm not going to do the 4th E, which is enrage. Somebody in the chat room just said, are you trying to enrage? No, that would be weird. Entertain, enlightenment, educate, and enrage. Although I suppose sometimes, based on the emails and the messages I got yesterday after my commentary, there was some people who were enraged by some of the things that I said. Just a couple. It wasn't like it was a huge deluge of mail. But I did get a few pieces of email or electronic comments over the transom messages and stuff that, some were in agreement, some were not. But apparently I did enrage some people. But I expected that. I thought it was a good, balanced discussion. And I hope that you guys felt that way too. It's good. I guess, what they say is if you can't motivate, you irritate. And maybe that did a little bit of that yesterday. I don't know. It wasn't intentional, but maybe it's a fringe benefit of just not sure. All right. So what do we got going on for today? Today is Tuesday, of course, as I mentioned earlier. Still no tacos. I don't know what the deal is with that. I really would like some breakfast tacos for Tuesday. And I'd love to do it. Tuesday, though, is our weekly dive into the top 3 featuring Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He comes in every week to help us discover, digest, dissect all the D words today. All these things that we're going to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about the increase in this budget, the out-of-control budget. I mean, it is, we've increased the budget. They stuffed back a bunch of things that were taken out previously, and they're increasing it. They're still going to have a huge surplus, and yet still we don't have we still do not have a full PFD. We still don't have a PFD, a full one, even though they are awash in money. And just no expectation that that's actually going to happen. Because why? Well, because you poor, pitiful children, they understand better than you how that money should be spent. Don't you know? Shut up and sit down, children. Let your betters talk in the corner as they decide what you should do. So anyway, that's the first big thing is we're going to talk about the out-of-control budget. Then we're going to talk about the cost of the Port of Anchorage, or Port of Alaska, or whatever we're calling it these days. The cost of redoing that, the cost on middle and lower income Alaskans. And then finally, we're going to talk about the fate of the campaign finance reform law. So that's happening. That's going to be our three big topics today on the weekly Top 3 with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He'll be joining us shortly to discuss those things. In hour 2, we'll take some phone calls. I actually just looked at the phone lines and realized somebody's been on hold for 12 minutes, which means they were on hold before the show even started. I don't know. I'm deciding whether or not to take that call before we go to the break here with Brad here in about 10 minutes. But we'll see. We'll see what happens here. I'm still pondering. Caller, if you want to hang out, you can. I may or may not take that phone call. But we're going to be take some phone calls at the top of the hour 2, and then we're going to get our weekly life coaching lesson from our friend Chris Story, the man from home. He is the Tony Robbins of Alaska. He is the guru of positivity. So he's going to come in and join us for that as well in hour 2. And then we'll finish things up. Whatever we do at the final segment is what we do. But a few announcements. First and foremost, I just saw it come up in the chat room. Shriner's Onions are here a week early, according to my friend Jack Klaus. Shriner Onions here a week early. Come and get them. So look for wherever you'd find onions. I know it's at the temple there in Anchorage, down in Anchorage. I don't know where they're going to be doing them in Fairbanks and Wasilla and down in Soldotna, but just keep an eye out. If you want your Shriner onions, and I know I get me a couple bags every year, you want to go out there and look at it early, of course, helping to benefit the Shriners, who in turn help benefit children across the state of Alaska. So we are grateful to them for that as well. Second piece of information is that there is public testimony on SB 39 today at 1 p.m. That is the election integrity bill. It's in Senate Finance today. They're going to be taking testimony starting at 1 p.m. And I've shared this up to my Facebook page if you want to go get the phone numbers. I'm going to blast through the phone numbers real quick. But if you want to go look them up, just go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. And you can see the numbers there. If you're in Anchorage, it's 907-563-9085. If you're anywhere else in the state, number to call to testify on SB 39, which is Shower's election integrity bill, is 844-586-9085. 844-586-9085. And this information is available up on my Facebook page. Just go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show, and you can get the numbers there as well. So, all right, some headlines. I'm just going to real quick. Let me just get this phone call out of the way. I feel bad. I don't know why they've been hanging out that long, but let's go find out, see what the deal is. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, Buenos Dias, is Brady from Las Vegas.
Brady, what's up?
Hey, I know that we are talking about the voting system and the voter rolls coming up all across the country right now. And the ERIC voter rolls that were established by the Democrats, mostly George Soros, that in all the states that Trump barely lost by, the key states, there's 8 of them in the United States, the ERIC voter rolls were used along with the ballot harvesting, which is going on in Alaska, to get rid of Trump. And if we don't get these ERIC voter rolls with all the people's names on there exposed, I don't think there should be an election. Also, with the money that we are giving to Ukraine, the other $33 billion that's supposed to go to Ukraine right now, we need to have some guarantees from our government that they're going to provide us with fertilizer and wheat in exchange for the $33 billion. If we don't put something on that, we are screwed as a country.
Okay. All right, Brady. Well, thank you for your call. I appreciate that. That's not the direction I was going this morning, so we'll continue on with what I'm doing over here. All right, thank you for your call. All right, let's take a look. The biggest story in the country right now is Politico's latest story, which apparently is a leaked opinion from the Supreme Court. Now, this is surprising in a couple different ways. First and foremost, the Supreme Court is excruciatingly secretive in its process. It keeps things very tight to the vest until the actual day normally. The deliberative process and everything else is normally kept very close to the vest until the day that they announce until they announce or publish an opinion. Well, Politico published a report late yesterday that shows that it is a draft opinion that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe v. Wade. It is marked as a first draft opinion of the court, and it's been known many times that the final word from the court, the opinions often change in big ways and small during that drafting process. This was a first draft. The opinion itself is not expected until June or July. But right now, this first draft shows that in a 6-3 vote, I'm sorry, no, not 6-3. It's a 6-3 majority. Anyway, it looks like it's a 5-4 vote. I apologize. 5-4 vote that they are overturning Roe v. Wade. Now, there's no comment out of the court. They have refused to answer any questions or anything else. But like I said, this is a rare thing, and it has immediately stoked the home fires. People were already outside the Supreme Court last night protesting. This is going to reinvigorate the midterms. You're seeing the Democrats already come to play on it. The draft report basically says that they would overturn Roe v. Wade and make it so that the states would be able to make their own decision on what would happen. The decision to overturn would lead the abortion, and basically it would say that states would have the decision whether or not to make abortion legal or illegal. Some states have already come out and said we're always going to be legal and it doesn't matter. California, New York specifically, many others, Oklahoma and others included, have already moved towards, again, banning it. To me, the timing on this is kind of odd and suspect, I guess I would say, based on what's going on. But, this thing, I mean, even if it had come out in June and July, and this is not the final decision, so it may not be exactly this, but I imagine it's probably going to be close to this. It was going to re-energize the midterms. This is what they were looking at. I think this is what Democrats were maybe not hoping for, but they're going to make hay while the sun shines and maybe try and stop what they see as a red wave overturning the midterm elections. And I think that's probably what is happening is this leak was put out there maybe as a way to help stir up the emotions of the Democratic base and get them motivated to go out there and actually vote. Because apparently that's one of their huge things. They believe that that's important. The murdering of babies is something that they want to fight for. Okay, all right, well, that's fine. So go for it. Go for it. But that is the big news that is sucking all the oxygen out of the room today. Nothing else really is going on. I mean, this is literally it is the top 15 headlines on Drudge right now, and even the ADN picked it up, got their piece from the was it Washington Post, New York Times, Associated Press. But yeah, they're never going to let a crisis go to waste. You can guarantee on that. That's going to happen as well. So that's really the big headline for today. But that's outside. We can't really do anything about it, and we could speculate all we want, but it doesn't matter. All I can say is good. Okay. I'm down with that. Wow, we're right up against the break already. Okay, so I guess I'm just going to shut my pie hole, and we're going to jump into this here and move on to other things and talk with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's up next. Right here, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will kick things off with a weekly top 3 right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, in the break right now, going back, let me get before I dive into all the comments. Let me get Brad on the line just to make sure that let me just make sure I got Brad ready to go. How about that? Let's do that right now. Okay. Things are a little strange. All right. Join without. There you go. How about that? Okay. So I'm entering the chat room now. Okay. So I think we're good to go. Hold on one second. And join with Donnie. There we go. Look at that. I can even hear myself in the background. That means Brad's got Brad's got stuff going.
Means I haven't muted the stream yet.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. You, my friend, you ready to go?
I am.
Good. I'm going to go through some of the comments here in the chat room because I haven't talked about that yet. But man, what a time to be alive, huh? What a crazy, crazy time at this point.
The rest of the year is going to be strange, Michael.
I could not agree more with that. So, all right, Brad, we'll hold the line. We're going to be right back to you. Let me go back to the chat room here and see what you guys have been talking about. Let's see, I think I lost everything. I stopped reading after the comment about the onions. Shrine onions are here. Love me some Shriner onions. Okay, Vidalias, sweet Vidalias. Apparently, repealing Roe v. Wade is going to pass. The bloodthirsty demons are going to lose their mind. I don't think that's the right term, out of control. It's worse than that. I think he was talking about the budget. Do you have caller ID just in case? No, I don't. Why hasn't the money god Murkowski got us cash to replace the port dock? It's Homeland Security. Don't tempt anybody. Onions, Vidalias. Yes. Where is Brad today? I missed it, says Paul. Nope, you're just about to experience it, Paul. Did you see how quickly they set up barricades outside this? Yes, they did, right outside the Supreme Court. I mean, they had barricades and police and everything else up there like immediately, if not sooner. Herman says nobody cares. The state's being destroyed anyway, so nobody cares about the Roe v. Wade thing. Okay. I mean, wow. Man, nihilism. Don't let a crisis or anything go to waste, says Greg. That's pretty much true. Politicians in general are feeling that for sure. If abortion is a privacy issue, then why isn't the vaccine mandate? Why do I need a vax to keep my job? This has been an argument that we've been making for a long time around here. I mean, if privacy is privacy, then let's, get ready for more Antifa, BLM riots. I imagine that there's going to be some people who are really agitated about this. I don't know if it'll go to that lengths, but yeah. Did they finally agree to a PFD total, says Paul? Not that I have heard of, but Brad may have better insight into that than I have. I've been kind of out of the loop the last couple of days in some of that stuff. Let's see. When Governor Mike Dunleavy issued a proclamation that people can vote by mail with no ID, that put the final nail in the coffin. I mean, they still have to have a witness signature, so I don't know exactly, then there's supposed to be an ID number on the ballots. Mine had one anyway. I did get my ballot in the mail yesterday as well, Greg. I got all the ballots for everybody in the household. Brad Keithley with his boomer connections. I don't know what that means. Apparently, Brad's a boomer. No, he's not a boomer. He's not a boomer. Where in Wasilla can we hand turn in our ballots? If Rob is in the chat room, he can hit us with that number. But you can basically take your ballots to any division of election office. All right. There you go. Defunding. We're 30 seconds out. We're about to dive into it. And we can find that out. I will. Rob had a link. I can't grab it right this second, but Rob Myers put up a link to all the places you could drop off your ballots to, which is what I'm going to do. We're going to collect all the ballots and go drop them off in person. Because the other one, you got to write all your information on the outside of the ballot, including your driver's license number and your last four of your social. I'm not real comfortable throwing that in the mail. Are you? Out in the open where everybody can see? Yeah, me either. All right, here we go. Jumping into it. All right. You're ready to do it. Let's dive into this with our friend Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to get into the weekly top three here and start to go over things. He joins us today. First things first, we're going to talk about the out-of-control state budget and how it's gotten even larger. I mean, like big-time larger. Brad Keithley joins us this morning live via Zoom. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
You know, no complaints. I'm here above ground on the right side of the grass. That's more than you could ask for at this point. So let's talk about this. I know you sent me some stuff. We were talking back and forth a little bit on Sunday, some of the numbers that were coming out, and it was shocking. And I'm not kidding. I mean, this is not hyperbole. This is like shocking, the amount of money that we're talking about being in this budget without a full PFD, and they have no problem spending it. Let's dive into that.
Well, the budget process isn't over either. That's sort of the scary part of all this. Over the course of the last week, some more budget numbers came in, and I've had a chance to total them up over the weekend. And as of the last update to legislative finances, sort of running recount of what the various committees are doing, UGF spending for FY22 is up something like $600 million from the governor's proposal. The governor's original proposal for FY22 was $4.6 billion. Now we're at something like $5.3 billion. I guess that's $700 million. And that doesn't count $5.3 billion. And that doesn't count the $1.2 billion that's being set aside for FY24 K through 12, the so-called forward funding of FY24 K through 12. So that's $600 million up for FY23 over the governor's proposal. But that's not the shocking one. To me, what really is the shocking one is what's going on with FY22, with the supplemental for FY22.
Right.
When you get in a session, you're doing two budgets at the same time. One is you're doing the forward-looking budget for the next fiscal year, but you've also got the ability to add supplementals to the prior years, to the current year's budget.
Right, what you're going through right now, right, the year that you're going through right now.
Right, which was passed in the last legislative session. Usually, and this is what Ledge Finance does and other budget analysts do, usually you think about the supplemental being in the $50 million range. And you think about it for being things like, we've had to fund disaster relief, sort of add supplementals to disaster relief over the last few years as we've had fires, right, and we've had to go out and hire and have more people, more activity around fire suppression. Or there's, some bills came due that you didn't expect, you lost some lawsuits. Usually that's around $50 million. This year, the FY22 supplemental, as best I can calculate it at this point, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 million. $500 million in supplementals for the operating budget, and $300 million in supplementals for the capital budget. And it's things like school bond reimbursement. You will recall that the last few years we have reduced the amount of school bond reimbursement by a given amount each year. The state hasn't, quote, fully funded school bond reimbursement. Well, there's $280 million, almost $300 million in the FY22 budget, the FY22 supplemental, that looks like it's catch up for the past underfunding of school bond reimbursement. There is $210 million between the FY22 and the FY23 supplemental, $210 million for oil and gas tax credits. Some of that is due under the statute because of higher prices. But what the Senate has done is what Sarah Rasmussen in the House tried to do in House Finance, but got rejected on the House floor. What Senate Finance is doing is adding an additional amount, forward funding oil and gas tax credits. The REAA trust fund, the fund that's used to support REAA schools, has $84 million in the FY22 budget. Extra retirement contributions, that is additional contributions to PERS and TERS to sort of build up the fund, is $89 million in the FY23 budget. $150 million in additional money for legislative services in the FY22 budget. It's just sort of, just the list just goes on and on and on. And so you've got $800 million. Now, again, the typical supplemental is somewhere in the $50 million range. You've got $800 million in the FY22 supplemental. The sort of amazing part of that is you got $800 million for additional spending, none for a supplemental PFD, none to try to bring the PFD even up to POMV 50/50, much less up to the full statutory level. So the spending is sort of just rolling on. They're spending on top of spending on top of spending, and it's not being covered very well in the mainstream media. You don't see an article analyzing it in the ADN. You don't see it in the Fairbanks Newsminer, the Juneau Empire. You don't even see it on Must Read, frankly. It's just piling up. There's one other way that is just sort of shocking. In the FY22 budget now has, the FY22 supplemental has $320 million in additional capital budget. The supplemental capital budget, the FY23 budget now has $380 million in capital budget. Last week, the Transportation Committee, the Senate Transportation Committee, voted out a GO bond, a general obligation bond bill, that has another $380 million on top of that. So we're talking about, in 1 year, between what they're shoving into FY22, what's now in FY23 as they increase the capital budget in FY23, and a GO bond that adds additional general obligation bond that adds additional money. We're talking about $1 billion in capital spending being authorized in 1 year. That's on top of whatever the federal government is bringing to us in terms of capital spending in addition to that. So, if all of this goes through, if the FY22 supplemental stays as it currently is, or maybe grows, the FY23 stays as it currently is, if the GO bond is passed out of the legislature and ultimately passed by the population, by voters, we've got a heck of a lot of capital money that's about to hit the state. So it's spending. It had been quiet on the spending front, frankly, right, up to about the last week, but now it's just exploding. And as I said, we still don't have either an operating budget or a capital budget out of the Senate, right, not even out of Senate Finance. They're not even on the floor. So we may not be finished with this yet. All of this additional spending, $1 billion in additional spending between FY22 and FY23, plus nearly $400 million in the GO bond, and no additional PFD in either FY22 or FY23.
And this doesn't even address, even after all that spending, the additional monies that are going to be surplus over this year and maybe next year, based on the revenue. I mean, so we're spending what we have like drunken sailors. We're going to have a bunch of money left over on top of that, and still no statutory PFD, no back PFD, nothing like that. Everything else gets taken care of, but forget about the money that belongs to the people.
Yeah, the one thing that really irritates in that regard is going back and truing up the school bond reimbursement. I mean, that's what they're clearly doing. When you look at those dollars, what they're clearly doing is they're going back and they're going to distribute money back to the school district, or back to the school districts or the municipalities for past school bond reimbursement. They're paying that back. Not even a mention and of trying to even get the FY22 or the FY23 PFD to match up to statute.
Right. This is well, it's the definition of insanity at this point. The amount of money that we're talking about being pushed out there for all these things, and no discussion on this. And as you said, I mean, it's an election year, Brad. What's the first thing they want to do? They want to make sure that they forward fund all those school bonds so that people can't say that they didn't support this and that. They forward funded $1.2 billion for schools and everything else. I mean, it's literally, it seems like the smorgasbord of options for those that are looking to get reelected at this point.
Yeah, and it's all coming at the expense. I mean, it's being funded in large part through PFD cuts from the statutory level. It's coming at the expense of middle and lower income Alaska families. And it's just, it's just irritating. It's irritating to see this additional spending after what we've just been through the last decade. I mean, come on, did we not learn any lessons from the last decade?
Right.
It's irritating to see all this additional spending. But then on top of that, it's irritating to see that, it's coming at the expense of middle and lower income Alaska families through continued PFD cuts.
Well, speaking of lower income and middle Alaskan families being affected, that actually leads us over to number 2. Give us a quick tease for number 2, the Port of Anchorage. I mean, Alaska. I mean, Anchorage. I mean, whatever we're calling it these days.
Whatever it takes to get funding for it. So the ADN had an op-ed by the editorial board over the weekend about the port, arguing that there should be additional funding for the port, and essentially saying why all of the excuses about additional funding should be ignored, and we should fund the additional port. What I want to focus on is where that money's coming from. What the ADN argued, how the ADN argued that the port funding that the port ought to be funded, and I think that's another very concerning thing. The ADN is proving again that they really don't care about middle and lower income Alaska families. We'll talk about that in the next segment.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We are going to continue here with him in just a moment. We're going to try and get through number 2 and then on to number 3, which is campaign finance reform. You want to join us in the chat room? Now's the time to do it. Facebook.com/Michael Duke Show/live. Probably the easiest way to get there. Or just go to my Facebook page and click on the live video there. We'll be commenting and talking with Brad during the break. And we'll be back with more on number 2 of the weekly top 3, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show.
In the break right now, shameless bribery. That's what Brian says, and I would not disagree with that. I mean, to me, this is very much geared towards these people being able to go out there and tell their constituencies, "Oh, look what I did for you. I protected you from having to pay back these school bonds, which you were always on the hook for, and the state was never guaranteed to pay, and now we can do it on top of that." And of course, all these capital projects too that we're going to bring to your communities. And I mean, $1 billion spent on this kind of stuff, plus another $300+ million for the reimbursement of the school bond issues and yet not a single extra dollar going towards past or future PFDs in that regard. It is, well, I mean, again, I think you said frustrating, irritating. I don't know what we want to use, but it is definitely all of those things, Brad.
Well, it's an indication that the legislature is there. There's a divide between government and the people of Alaska. And the legislature is there to look out for government and to look out for government services and the constituencies that are tied to government services. And they really don't care about middle and lower income Alaska families who are the ones that are ending up paying for this through PFD cuts. It is sort of staggering in the scope as you sort of go through these projects and see what they're spending it on. I mean, oil and gas, forward funding oil and gas tax credits. I mean, I'm historically been one of the staunchest defenders of the oil industry and the need to play fair with the oil industry. But forward funding oil and gas tax credits, that's just I don't know what to say about that. That's just carrying over the edge.
They got all the money.
And all of the supplement, when you go through the supplemental, the $800 million in the supplementals, when you go through the $600 million in the additional spending that is being added over the governor's budget in FY23, it's just, it's project after project, spending after spending after spending. And it's not, I mean, some people say, oh, it's just more entitlement programs. No, there's not a Medicaid expansion in the bunch.
Right.
It is projects that are for specific groups of Alaskans, specific constituencies that they've been down there lobbying for, and they've been able to convince the legislature of their case.
So this is actually kind of a win for corporate cronyism, right? I mean, businesses that have built their business model around government contracts, whether that's telecom, whether that's construction, whether that's whatever, they've been down there lobbying hard to get these monies to get out there because they're dependent on it. And somebody said, okay, we'll give it to you at this point. Am I off base?
No, you're on base. And then I would add on top of that, the municipalities, local governments who are down there lobbying for things like school bond reimbursement.
Right.
I mean, they are another segment of industry, of the lobbying industry down there trying to, look out for themselves. And everybody will say, all of them will say, oh, well, this is in the state's best interest. It's in the best interest of us to come current on oil and gas tax funding or oil and gas tax credits. It's in the best interest of the state for us to pay back all the school bond reimbursements, in the best interest of the state to do this or do that. It's in the best interest of a segment of the state. It's in the best interest of a group of a part of the state. But, you add all this stuff up and we've just spent a heck of a lot of money satisfying a lot of constituencies and leaving, as you and I have both said, leaving middle and lower income Alaska families out in the cold.
Right. Well, and again, this goes back to a lot of companies which we have named previously on this program, including GCI and others in the telecom industry and the AGCA and some of these other big associated, general contractors and other businesses who have built an entire business model up around a dependency on government spending, and they are more than willing to exercise and expend lots of dollars to convince legislators and the public that those monies are necessary for the state to move forward, not to mention to keep their companies afloat.
Well, exactly right, Michael. And this is the time that, we're flush with money, oil prices are up, so we've got all this oil revenue, and this is the time that they're trying to not only get themselves well from the past, but to make themselves well going forward in terms of forward funding of K through 12 and reimbursement of school bonds and forward funding oil and gas tax credits. It's the time that they're trying to carve off as much for themselves as they can.
Right.
And, and so their argument is, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So I might as well do it.
Right.
As part of this.
Well, and special interests win again, which seems to be the common thread around here at this point. They always seem to be the winners, and the people, especially lower and middle income Alaskans, are the losers in the deal. And it's all going towards, as Don Ardwin says in the chat room, a long-term plan to eliminate the PFD. I can see that already. Handwriting on the wall. Folks, we're about to rejoin the radio. Please like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Let's continue. Brad Keithley's our guest. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, we continue now with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Big editorial in the ADN. The title of that editorial is Lawmakers Are Happy to Fight for a Big PFD, but what's that attitude when it comes to the Port of Alaska? And yet it seems like the outcome still is the same, that the lower and middle income Alaskans are going to be biting a harder bullet when it comes to this. Brad, give us your take on what's going on with the Port of Alaska, Port of Anchorage, and the fight over the PFD.
So this entire editorial, and it's dated April 30th, so it came out over the weekend. This entire editorial is focused on setting up the PFD against the Port of Alaska and making the argument that the Port of Alaska is more important than the PFD. And so anybody who's fighting for the when you think about the PFD, you ought to be putting the port first, and you ought to be, prioritize spending for the port over the PFD. There are good arguments for spending for the port. I mean, a huge amount of Alaska's goods, imported goods, come through the port. They're distributed throughout the state. There are arguments for why we should maintain the port. And the municipality has a good argument for why that, in part of that should be the state's responsibility. I don't want to use this segment to argue about port funding. It's where the funding comes from that I think is the core of the problem. This editorial doesn't mention at all using equitable methods to pay for the port, using methods that all Alaska families would contribute to, using methods that either have some sort of broad-based tax to them or some other form of funding that would involve all Alaska families contributing toward the cost. The entire editorial is focused on cutting the PFD, arguing that we shouldn't be paying a big PFD, which is now defined as POMB 50/50, which is a third less than the statutory PFD. We shouldn't be paying this big PFD when we ought to be funding the port. And the consequence, I mean, what they're trying to do is if you fund the port through PFD cuts, which is what they're arguing, that pushes the burden. The people who are going to be paying for the port are middle and lower income Alaska families. The top 20% will be paying a trivial share of their income, and in fact, a trivial share of the overall costs in meeting that $600 funding to the port as part of if you do it through PFD cuts. So once again, the ADN editorial board is out there arguing that middle and lower income Alaska families, 80% of Alaska families ought to be paying the bulk of the costs, while the top 20% get by with just a trivial share of the costs. And I think that's just outrageous. The fact that the editorial didn't mention at all that even consider that there should be other more equitable funding mechanisms, I think it's just a horrible sign on their part that they're just, they just want to take it out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families and let the top 20% escape. Let the owners of the ADN and others in the top 20% escape.
Somebody in the chat room just said, I thought the funding for the port was coming from the infrastructure money. But none of that is appearing at this point. This is all talking about strictly state funding at this point.
They have to compete for infrastructure money. And the editorial does a good job, frankly, of dealing with that issue and saying that it was going to come from, that it was going to come from infrastructure money. Part of it may come from infrastructure money, but the port has to compete for it. And what they want the state to do is to come up with the funding in advance in the event that they don't get the additional federal funding. And the article and the editorial makes a valid point that even if they do get federal funding, it may not be to the extent necessary to complete the port, and so they're going to need additional funding in any event.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're talking about the weekly top three. Brad, this whole thing is frustrating on many levels for me personally, because again, I live in the Matsu. We've seen that the port of Matsu is a deep water port there at Point McKenzie. It could help split that burden, lighten the burden. If we had a railhead there, it would help develop and drill that stuff to the other state. But it seems like we keep putting all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak, and that's leading to, I think, some real challenges at this point. What say you?
Well, Michael, I don't argue with that. Yes, we could do Matsu, but again, it's all about funding. How are we going to pay for Matsu? How are we going to pay for the rail extension? How are we going to pay for whatever upgrades would need to be done? Excuse me, at Matsu. The knee-jerk reflexive action that the ADN editorial takes and others take is, well, we'll just take it out of the PFD. I mean, PFDs, that's just slush fund money. It's just, going out there to Alaska families. We'll just take it out of the PFD. It's a tax. When you take it out of the PFD, it's a tax primarily on middle and lower income Alaska families. It's a regressive tax that takes the most as a share of income, increasingly from middle income and then lower income Alaska families. So yes, we can argue about whether Matsu ought to bear some of the burden. We can argue whether Anchorage should have. We should just bolster up Anchorage, which has been the traditional point. We can argue about whether the rail extension, but the ultimate question is, whatever we do in terms of that spending, who's going to pay for it? And the fact that they're using the PFD, the fact that the go-to slush fund now is the PFD, means that middle and lower income Alaska families are paying for it, regardless. It's statewide. I mean, right. You got people in Nome with PFD cuts. You got people in Bethel. You got people in Barrow. You got people in Tok that are going to be contributing to these middle and lower income Alaska families in those communities that are going to be contributing through PFD cuts. So yes, we can argue about whether it ought to be the Matsu port, the rail extension, Anchorage. We can argue about all that. But the question to me is, who's going to pay for it?
The biggest argument is, where is the money coming from? And it seems like it always goes back to the piggy bank being the PFD, which again goes back to the comment earlier from Don Ardwin, who said this is all part and parcel of the plan to basically eliminate the PFD and let them use it to spend however they want. Yep.
The top 20% are on a roll. They're gonna do as much as they can to fund the state through PFD cuts.
All right. Well, let's move on to number three. We actually made it to number three today, which is a discussion on what you consider to be one of the biggest issues that we should be facing before the end of the session, although it doesn't seem to be getting a lot of love, and that is campaign finance reform.
Campaign finance reform has gotten out of the House. It's over in the Senate. I think it's still in Senate State Affairs. I think they have a hearing on it this week. So it's one of those that has a chance to make it before the end of the session. To me, if somebody said, what's your top three priorities, campaign finance reform would be one of those top three priorities. I think we're facing an without campaign finance limits. I think we're facing an election cycle this year where we're going to have just huge amounts of money. And if the Republicans think it's all going to go to their side, they're just absolutely mistaken. If the Democrats think it's all going to go to their side, they're absolutely mistaken. It's just going to be a huge amount of money come into the state. If Roe versus Wade is overturned, if the news over the last day is a correct representation of what's going to happen when the Supreme Court rules on it, we're going to have a wild election season. The whole con debate is going to turn into pro-life and pro-choice because, you know, we've got the right to privacy provision in the current Alaska Constitution, and the pro-life people are going to push a constitutional convention to wipe that out, not trusting that they're going to be able to get an amendment out of the legislature. So we are facing a wild election season in which Alaskans don't control the outcome because it's going to be a huge amount of money coming in from outside. I think a very important thing that this legislature needs to do before it goes home is enact campaign finance reform. I think a very important thing for this governor to do before he goes home is enact campaign finance reform. And I think everybody's going to rue the day if they don't do it.
Well, and explain why. I mean, the specific problem with the campaign finance reform at this point is the fact that we now currently have unlimited contribution limits. I mean, there is basically, you can give anything to anyone, any race, any candidate. I mean, that's the problem right now. We could become the dumping ground for, the so-called dark money from outside and everything else. You got about a minute here.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, with unlimited restrictions, the pro-life movement, again, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, the pro-life movement is going to come in support of Les Guerra. A lot of money coming in support of Les Guerra. Governor Dunleavy, the Republicans think that campaign unlimited financing works to their benefit. It doesn't. We saw that on Prop 1 in the last election cycle, the ranked choice voting. We're going to see a lot of outside progressive money come into this state if Roe versus Wade is overturned. We need to have limits so that Alaskans are able to decide Alaska elections as opposed to a ton of outside money coming in to decide them.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, we appreciate you coming on board here this morning. Not a lot of great news. Thanks for being such a Debbie Upper on this one. I really appreciate it. But we look forward to hearing more about this. What are you watching? Quickly, 20 seconds here. What are you watching this week?
The budget and SB 199, the PFD bill, the Senate's PFD bill that didn't go on the floor last week, and it's still sitting out there to go on the floor in these last 2 weeks.
All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time for this. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. Chris Story, open line, phone calls. We'll be back. Oh, I can't imagine. We watched what happened with ballot measure number 2. We watched this. Well, I mean, let's face it. We've been seeing this. This is a pattern. Ballot measure number 2. They spent about $7 million to get people to pay attention to that and to vote in favor of that. A lot of people didn't even know after they'd voted what they'd actually voted for. We saw it during the debate on Prop 1. We saw, millions of dollars being poured into that. We saw it in previous bills that when GCI spent $4 or $5 million to get the POMV changed and all these other things. We've seen the influence, the outsized influence that millions of dollars can have on Alaskans, and not having any contribution limit on that or on candidate contributions could, and on top of that, add the ballot measure 2 stuff and the ranked choice. And I mean, this could just be, it could be unbelievable. This could be the of a lifetime, could be something of a lifetime at this point.
The real beneficiaries of it are going to be the TV stations and the newspapers and the people who print the flyers that come in your mail. That's going to be where a lot of this money goes. But Alaskans are going to be inundated with it. And what's really what I can't emphasize enough, for those that think they're going to have the advantage by unlimited financing, if the Republicans think they're going to have the advantage by unlimited financing, they aren't. If the Democrats think they're going to have advantage by unlimited financing, they aren't. The losers are going to be Alaskans who have all of this money coming at them, all of these messages coming at them, and sort of lose control of their own election. We become sort of the battleground for, again, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, we become sort of the battleground for national elections. And people who, Alaska's a cheap date. You and I have talked about this a lot. It's cheap to advertise here relative to elsewhere in the country. People will come in and use that money to try to influence the Senate election. They'll come in and try to influence the governor's election. They'll come in to try to influence the constitutional convention voting. We're just going to have a huge amount of money. We need to get it under control. The irony of this is the federal election, the Senate race itself will be subject to those limits, will be subject to federal limits on campaign contributions.
Right.
But the state races won't. And we're going to see a huge amount of money come into the state races, frankly, trying to indirectly influence the Senate race. It's just going to be a nightmare. And the one way to get it under control is to put campaign finance limits back in place. There's a bill in front of State Senate Affairs to do it. I hope they get it out, and I hope they reconcile any issues with the House before the end of the session, or else we're going to be talking about this for years to come. How money flooded Alaska in 2022.
State Senator Rob Meyer says on YouTube, he says SB 199 hits the Senate floor today, so you'll be watching and looking for that today, and we'll be seeing where it goes. 199, of course, is the 75-25 bill. Starts out at 50-50, but then you got to come up with $800 million in revenue. I'm going to be interested to watch to see what the amendments to that bill are going to be, because that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. What can they get amended on the floor? Because this is an unusual bill coming out of a committee without enough votes to get it passed. Usually they don't pass it out unless they've counted heads. And this is going to be the fight of the year, I think, right here on this bill.
It's gonna be an interesting bill, and of course it still has to go over to the House side if anything passes today. I mean, if I had to bet, I'm not sure that anything would pass on this bill. It may get a lot of amendments, and it ultimately may just end up not getting enough votes to pass. But yep, it'll be something important to watch.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, if it doesn't get enough votes to pass, that's not a bad thing. If it gets amended properly, so that they take down the ridiculous $800 million amount, if they change the length of the 50-50 split, if they do, I mean, but again, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, whether it passes or not, this is still just a statutory change. They could still just, at their convenience, ignore it and go, well, it's just, we got to do what we got to do, I mean, that's the long and the short of it, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Well, we're watching that. We're also watching SB 39, which is coming up for testimony today as well in Senate Finance. A lot of moving parts here as we come down to the last 2 weeks. Everybody's saying that Bert Stedman and company want to be out of there before the end of the actual session. No idea yet what the governor's going to veto. I mean, we just have, $600 million over his proposed budget, plus all this other forward funding stuff. I don't think he has any impetus to really wield the veto pen unless, I don't know. I can't read his mind at this point. What do you say here in the last minute?
Plus 800 million in FY22 supplementals.
Yeah,
exactly. It's just a tsunami of spending that's getting stacked up here. I would not want to be running for governor as a conservative if I don't veto a heck of a lot of this.
Yeah.
He's gonna upset certain constituencies who otherwise, thought they'd lobbied through they'd played the game and lobbied through their money. But gosh, as a conservative, if you're running out there with having signed bills for $800 million on FY22 supplemental and $600 million above your proposal on FY23, I don't think you're going to be running as much of a conservative. The real beneficiary of that's probably going to be Charlie Pierce, who can say, "Boy, I'd never do that,"
right.
And sort of become the mainstream conservative candidate while the governor's stuck out there having become the crony capitalist.
Yeah, no, he's going to have to really step up the plate. I mean, if he doesn't veto a substantial number of these increases, I think his he's not going to be as relative or as he's not going to make it. All right, Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate it. We got to go. Thanks for coming on the program this morning.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got to go. We're about to jump into this. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator on the web, by the way, at michaeldukeshow.com. If you want to go over there, you can find the podcast. You can find the links, all the stations that we are attached to, everything else. Go out there and get everything you can, including links to our Facebook page and more. We appreciate you guys coming in and being part of it. You guys all ready to jump in and to discuss these things? Well, we're going to open up the phone lines now for this segment, and we're going to see what you guys have to say on this and anything else that we've covered this morning, including this discussion on what any of the top three that Brad and I were just talking about, including campaign contributions and more. And I think maybe even a little bit of a discussion about voter registration. There's some interesting there's some interesting comments on this in a piece that James Brooks wrote yesterday, talking about Alaskan having 106% of voter registration rate, which is actually even low. It's closer to 113% of voter registration. We could talk about that as well. Coming up in just a bit, we're going to be discussing a little bit more of an uplifting topic with our uplift guru, with our life coach, and the guru of positivity. That would be Christopher Story from my adopted hometown of Homer. He's going to be with us, and we will talk with him about that here in just a little bit. Meanwhile, phone lines are open, so let's get into that, shall we? 433-3150, 433-3150 is the Pivotel call-in line. If you would like to be part of it, we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Feel free to come on board and chat with us, and let's just do our thing, shall we? Shall we just get into it and talk about it and see what you have to say? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on all the things that are going on around there. Feel free to give us a call and give us a shout again at 907-433-3150 if you would like to call in and let your voice be heard on that, or really kind of any of the things that we've talked about this morning. The Alaska Division of Elections mailed out 560,000 ballots last Wednesday. That was their edict. Now, according to the list, the records list, the state has 586,000 registered voters in the state of Alaska, but that there are only 552,000 people living in the state who are of voting age. That's a registration of 106,000. But if you subtract the non-citizens, convicted felons, those who are ineligible to vote, it was 113,000%. Excuse me. It was 113%, not 113,000. It was 113% of the 2022 election voting estimate. That's huge. But I learned some things in reading this article that I didn't know before. Interestingly enough, state law allows people to stay registered when they move away from the state of Alaska as long as they have the intent of returning to Alaska and don't register to vote anywhere else. I mean, they could be outside for 10 years, 15 years. And still, as long as they don't register to vote anywhere else, they can still they could still be registered in the state of. I mean, I had some crazy stuff in here, things that we could talk about. Meanwhile, let's go to the phones. We got a couple lines on hold, so we'll start off over there this morning and see what you guys have to say. First, before we dive into this with Chris Story, I love taking some calls. Let's jump into it. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good morning, Mike. It's Lee out of Denali.
Hello, Lee. What's on your mind, friend?
What's on your mind, friend? Well, brother, man, you got a real good topic this morning with regard to external finance coming in to influence state elections. And keep in mind, you have to go back and look at the legislative body that actually approved the removal of the safeguards we had in place. In other words, they intentionally removed the safeguards to allow this so-called black money to roll into the state. In other words, it keeps the status quo the way that the national party leadership in D.C. wants it to be. And anybody that believes that your homegrown person that's running for either Republican or Democratic seats do not have trace money going back to D.C. would be completely wrong. That also goes to show how our inept Republican Party leadership in this state have allowed themselves to be taken over by the money barons inside of the Beltway in D.C. So by all means, keep talking this up, man. You're on to something, and I truly hope that the Senate, which I must admit I very seriously doubt they take up and approve anything, but there's hope that they might actually take it up if enough people get on the phones and start demanding that they have some accountability.
Well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, we need to be watching these these scoundrels out there, and again, with unlimited funds that that go into this, that could go into this potentially. I mean, it's a hot mess at this point. I mean, it is definitely something that we need to be keeping an eye on at every turn. And I agree with you.
One of the best examples is with the previous run by an out-of-state person who, of course, grew up here purportedly in Alaska, but went on to make his fortune elsewhere. There was $20 million tied into his campaign against Sullivan, and nobody even blinked an eye at it because it was 95% external to the state funded. So if people think that there's some sort of free ride here where mom and pops are contributing and their favorite candidate gets in, that's just a moronic view to take when it's our state future that is really being pondered and basically thrown into the garbage can when we allow these external entities to capitalize on the naivete of the voting population in this state, especially when the legislative body allows our safeguards to be thrown out under their watch.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, man, thanks for keeping things going.
Appreciate it, Lee. Thank you for your call. Let's continue ahead on to the next caller here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good morning, Mike. This is Jeremy in Kasilop, Alaska.
Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning.
What's on your mind?
Are we live?
You're on the air right now talking, my friend. What's on your mind?
Okay, well, I just wanted to throw my support behind Sarah Palin because, you know, when Obama got elected in 2007 and continued all the wars and then the Ron Paul revolution and the Tea Party movement was going on, and Sarah Palin was very invested in getting people like Senator Rand Paul and Justin Amash and Mike Lee and a lot of those other Tea Party cats that are in our Congress. And so I think she gets my vote just based on that.
Okay. I mean, and that's good. Any concerns about anything that's happened since then? I mean, that was 2010 when the Tea Party came into existence. That's been 12 years ago. Nothing has changed your mind on that? No other candidate stands out on that?
Well, I think I like Nick Begich, but, you know, with that last name, he has the far hill to climb, but
Sure.
I think Sarah would do an excellent job at representing Alaska in Congress. I mean, she's a grab the bull by the horns type of woman. You know what I mean?
Right.
We
right.
need more of those in Congress.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for your call. I appreciate you calling in and joining us. 433-3150, the Pivotal call-in line. We're listening to what you have to say this morning on everything that's going on. I mean, yeah, explaining to my kids last night as they opened up their ballots and they're like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, this is what we've been talking about, 48 candidates. Wow. Let's go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Ken from North Pole.
Hello, Ken.
Hey, I was just listening to your first segment, and I was thinking that this is why the CON is so absolutely important, because it's really becoming apparent that the legislature doesn't really care about what the people think or about the will of the people. They seem pretty content to just do whatever they want. And so until we change the Constitution and take the power of the PFD or any control of the PFD away from the legislature, they're going to just continue to do what they want because that's their funding. That's all their power. They don't have to listen to anything else.
Right. Well, I mean, again, this goes right back, Ken, to what I've said for a long time, is the politician's disease, right? The politicians and the bureaucrats' disease is somehow they know better than you how all that money should be spent. I mean, the minute that they got elected, the minute that they got appointed, the minute that the bureaucrat got hired, he's some kind of expert and can somehow see everything. He's, got a little bit of omniscience or something, and he can understand the big picture better than we can at our little, peon local level as to how those money should be spent. They don't want to be bothered by us. They've made the decisions and they know. That's kind of the overall. That's kind of the overall feel. The only fear that I have with the con is that it could potentially be hijacked. And what Brad was just talking about with, of course, the potential now, the real potential for Roe v. Wade to be overturned, is that they could pour a ton of money into the Constitutional Convention to sway or create delegates or get somebody in there to do something, more dastardly. And that would be problematic as well. But go ahead.
Well, it would be problematic, but unfortunately, I mean, we're already there with the problems. If we do nothing, the problems are just going to get worse. The legislature, when they have control of the PFD, that's all they need, because they can direct that money to the unions, to their different special needs groups, different special interests, I should say, and that will control their reelection. I mean, those are the groups that kick in the most money to their campaigns, and so they don't have to worry about what the people want or the will of the people, because they've just guaranteed their reelection with those campaign funds from the special interests, because they're directing the PFD to their pet projects. Right.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. That's what we were just talking about in this last segment with Brad. Was this is all about whether it's paying off the school bond issues, whether it's kowtowing to the unions. We talked yesterday about Josh Revak trying to force HB 55. He pulled a Rule 48 on the floor of the Senate and got some Democrats to support him to pull that defined benefits program for the firefighters and the first responders to come out. That's a play to get union support in those kind of things, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing more and more of these political maneuvers.
Oh, absolutely, because that's where all their power is. And I think we have to have a constitutional convention to take any control of those monies away from the legislature, because while they have it, that takes all the air out of everything else.
Right.
Nothing else happens. It's all about the PFD and all about how much they can take.
Yep. All right. Well, I appreciate you calling in and joining us. Thank you for sounding off, Ken. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're up against the break, actually. Chris Story is going to be joining us in just a hot minute, and then we will be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll get our weekly uplift here on the other side, and then we'll open up the phone lines after that for more open line, open forum. If you want to talk about the candidates that you support, feel free to call in, and we'll talk about that for the big special congressional race. We'll return in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Getting ready to take that call from Chris Story this morning. Let me go back out here. Does it make more sense for the ranked choice voting to be in the primary only? The general should be the one vote for the candidate of your choice. I don't know. Maybe what you're saying, using ranked choice for the primary and rank all 48 candidates down to the top 4 and then have those top 4 be the one vote at the end. Is that what you're saying? I mean, it could work that way. I don't know if it would be any better. Herman says, so crappy, although he doesn't say crappy. Sarah gives us a full PFD and an energy rebate. Even President Trump supports her. But here in Alaska, we have radio stations that do hit jobs on her, the one that can help us. I don't know if it's a hit job. I don't know of anybody who's a hit job. Jeremy just said he supported her. Just because she may not be a candidate that I would choose to support doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to support her, Herman. And just because maybe I believe another candidate would do a better job does not mean that I think that she's not a good person and that I won't vote for her in the ranked choice portion of it. So I don't know, I don't know what you're going on and on about, but, you did a hit job on her. I just pointed out her flaws. I don't know if that's a hit job or not. I pointed out some of the reasons why I would not support her in a primary, but I would support her, like I said before, if she was on the ranked choice card, I'm going to rank her for sure. But, you when you get your own radio show, you can put up whoever you want to talk about. And you can run down whoever else you don't want to talk about. That's part of the gig, man. That's part of how it is. Please tell your next guest to leave sorcery like Harry Potter books out of the discussion. Demonic. Okay. All right. Whatever you say, man. You're rapidly approaching the fringe element at this point, Herman. I'll be honest with you. Rapidly approaching the fringe element. All right. Let's see. Sarah Palin is actually supposed to be on the air at 9:07 a.m. on KSRM down on the peninsula. So if you're down on the peninsula, you should be able to listen to Sarah Palin this morning. I might actually even tune in if they stream it. I might tune in just to hear what she has to say. Interesting stuff for sure. Sarah was not well received in Fairbanks at the Republican convention. Yeah, I mean, I saw that. How do you ensure convention delegates are going to care about the people more than legislators? That's a good question, Chris. I mean, again, it's a whole election process, so you have to pick. You have to pick somebody based on, I guess, what they say or what their track record is. So it's the same kind of question about, how do you elect legislators in that regard? She's a better choice than what we have, says Ann. It's true. I mean, like I said, if she's in the top 4. I will definitely be ranking her for sure in the top 4. I mean, in that final ranked choice, she will definitely get my vote in that regard. This host is doing another hit job. Boy, you're really just jumping up and down on that, huh? All right. The Palinites on all the Alaska sites I follow always claim that any negative comments on her record are hit jobs. Oh, and those who say them are rhinos. Okay, there you go. I mean, if pointing out people's flaws, if pointing out the mistakes that people have made, then that's a hit job because you point out the mistakes people made. Then I guess sign me up for that hit job. Abdul from Pakistan, I think was the way. Abdul from Pakistan. I don't know what Herman is talking about. Chris Story is on the line with us. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Wonderful. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, right? I think it's about accountability.
Sure.
How do you own that mistake, and what have you done in the interim since the mistake made in today?
Yeah, no, exactly.
There is no exception to that.
Well, no, and I think anybody deserves. I mean, anybody can be held up critically, and you could point out the problems. I don't think it's wrong to point out the mistakes that people have made if they're doing something wrong. I've done the same with pretty much every legislator or elected official that I've talked to. I've made mistakes as well. Hey, it happens. Chris Story, by the way, never made a mistake, ever. We're going to find out all about that here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, we're ready. We're ready already. We're ready to dive into it. We're ready to talk about it. We are waiting for our big pick-me-up, our weekly pick-me-up, and that is from our friend Chris Story, the man from Homer, who comes on right now to discuss. We were just talking about how he has never, ever made a mistake in his life. I mean, others of us do. And it's okay to point him out, but Chris has never made a mistake in his. No, he didn't assert that. I did. That's just me poking fun. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Thank you for correcting the record, Michael. I think it's interesting that a quality of life is made up by moments in time, like this moment, literally right here, is adding up into what I will consider to have been a quality of life. And absent mistakes, we all make mistakes, but it's about accountability. But what I really want to talk to you about today, and you take me, Michael, where you will, but I wanted to think about this idea of equality of life being made up by quality of days, which are made up by quality of moments, meaning you can set your ideal day. It's a practice. Lawyers have practice. We real estate agents have a practice. Doctors have a practice. Accountancies are a practice. Whatever it is you wish to do in life, it's just a practice. So if you want to set up an ideal life, you need to start with an ideal day. And how do you start an ideal day? With an ideal moment in the morning or an ideal morning. You set yourself up for success first thing in your day, but it has to be conscious, and I think you have to design it. And that's what I want to talk about.
Okay. I mean, again, inch by inch, everything's a cinch, right? I mean, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So the idea is if you have an overall arching goal, then you break it down into more manageable chunks, and you break those more manageable chunks down into more manageable bite-sized pieces, et cetera. I could see this. Let's get started.
Well, just thinking about the idea of a design. Life happens to you sometimes while you're busy making other plans. It's just what happens. Sometimes you end up where you are with what you've got and go, wait a minute, how did this happen? Or how did this spin out of control? Or how did I get so fortunate or lucky to be where I am here today, and so forth? And I think there's a design in play whether or not we recognize it. And I am suggesting we recognize it. It's not my idea. A guy named James Womack wrote a book a number of years ago, and I interviewed him, and I've interviewed him a few times, and he's a pretty interesting character, and he does a lot of business coaching and consulting and so forth out of California. And he has this one chapter in his book, and it's what I glommed onto, and it's about creating your ideal day. And I can't tell you anything else about his book or practice, but I remember that because I implemented it about 15 years ago in my own life. And so the practice starts with, and how he suggests you treat this like an exercise, is to take a quiet moment by yourself somewhere alone with a pen and paper, no screens, just you, a pen, paper, a pencil and paper, or a chisel and a piece of slate, something that's very physical that you're doing. And maybe you've got some soft music playing, maybe whatever calms your mind is in the background. It could be nothing, it could be at the beach with birds, whatever. And you really just sit with your own thoughts, and you imagine and you dream about and you envision an ideal day. What does it look like? Who's with you? What are you doing? How does it start? How does it end? what does that ideal day look like? And literally notes as fast as you can, as thoughts, no judgment, judge any thoughts that come into your mind, be they critical of yourself, whatever, write them down and create a vision and go back again to it, maybe the next day. And you begin to design something in your mind that then you can live in the world. My version of an ideal day probably looks different than yours, as is different than, my family's or anybody else's. It's unique to you, like your thumbprint, like your fingerprints. It's yours, but you get to design this and live by design and on purpose. And it's not always easy. Sometimes you fall off. You have to get back on the bicycle and keep riding. But my ideal day starts with a routine in the morning that I hold sacred for myself. It sets me up for an ideal day. And then that day can get a little sporadic throughout the day because we live in a fast-paced world, and the career choice I've made means a phone call I get in an hour could change the trajectory of the rest of my day. But I've protected that morning, that routine, that time with myself, and how I've set up for an ideal day. And then I have an ideal close to that day. And in the middle, I'm open. I make appointments with people and I set things up for success, but I'm also open and flexible. But that's my ideal day. Some people need more rigidity. Some people need total flexibility. And it's unique to you. And I think it's a practice. And so if you look at it like, oh, I didn't get my routine in this morning, or I didn't live my ideal day yesterday, it's no problem. You have tomorrow, you have this day, and it's a practice you come back to again and again. And in the end, I think we'll look back and go, this has been a great life. This really has been by design and on purpose, and I've lived my way. We can be like Frank Sinatra. Did it my way, baby.
Well, I remember reading, some of the more esoteric reading I did when I was younger, Henry David Thoreau talking about, nature and being out there in that silence and basically meeting, in those times of silence and less, lack of distraction, meeting the mind of God, so to speak, and being able to pull your thoughts together. Ralph Waldo Emerson had something similar in some of his writings about the same kind of thing. And we are so busy today. We are so inundated. We are so, from the time we get up to that first time we look over at our phone to turn the alarm off and then look at our notifications that appeared in the middle of the night, our brain starts working, and we don't seem to be able to take that quiet time to be able to analyze, to have that, like you said, to create what is the perfect morning. Is the perfect morning not having those distractions, and what does that building block create? What is your perfect morning, and what are the other building blocks that go into place beyond that?
Oh, you mean specifically what is mine? Well, it's irrelevant. What mine is, it's up to you. For example, Elon Musk, the most talked about human on the planet right now, probably more talked about than Vladimir Putin even, and he's the richest man in the world. But everything I've read about his life in the past and even recently, no thank you. His version of hustle is basically working around the clock, dropping on a cot or a couch in an office, what have you, wake up the next morning at sunup and start again and again. He just lives a different version of what an ideal day looks like. And that, to me, is frenetic, it's chaotic, and even if you could promise me $250 billion at the end of 18 years of doing that, I'd say still no thank you. Yeah. So it's a different version of life. It's 200% different than what I want out of life, even though I have my own goals and ideals. But my perfect morning, just to answer your question specifically, an ideal day for me starts off with reflection. I have to take accountability for what I did yesterday, what I said yesterday. There's times that I say things that I regret and say, oh, I wish I'd handled this differently. I reflect on that in the morning. I think about it, and I think about how do I want to take that into today, and do I want to let it weigh me down, or do I want to learn from it, accept responsibility, and move on, and make today better? And I take time to literally reflect on that. I pray. I say thank you for this day in my life and my health and my family, and I go through it's very, spiritual and quiet, and it's to me and to my own self. And then I'll brew a pot of coffee, of course. That's an ideal morning for me. And spend probably a good hour reading something, anything from it's books, no screens. So for me, that first hour of the day, I just no screens around me whatsoever. Just simply for the fact that I cannot trust myself not to delve in and find out what's happening, be it on Truth Social, or I just joined Twitter now that Elon's purchased it and said, oh, let's give this a try. I protect myself from myself for at least the first hour, sometimes 2 in the morning. But that's, to me, setting up an ideal day of really seriously taking accountability. You made a joke at the beginning that I've never made a mistake. I make mistakes every day, and yet I really try to bring myself back to that idea of taking personal responsibility and saying, how would I handle that differently today? If I had to do over again, would I do something different? And often it's yes, I would have handled that differently. And I've learned, and you get to move on from it and just set up for an ideal day. And somewhere along the way in that morning routine as well, I run. And if I don't get my physical exercise in, then I got to get it in sometime during the day. It's just become a habit for me. Setting up an ideal day is completely different, though, than somebody else. And that's why I hasten to share mine, because it's irrelevant to you. What matters is that you sit with that pad and paper, pad and pen, as Jason Womack instructed, and just sit with your thoughts and design your life.
Okay, so let me say, so step me in the, give me the building blocks here. Once I've developed my perfect morning, or even perfect day, what do I do beyond that? Do I just stack that same thing on top of each other over and over and over again, or what do I do?
2 things, yes, and replace the word perfect with ideal, because in an idyllic day, it's never even going to be perfect. So looking for perfection, I think, sets you up to fail in advance. And so I like the idea in the term of ideal, not perfect, because there really is nothing perfect about anybody's life. And I think when we think that, suddenly it's like, well, mine will never stack up. I'll never be perfect like that guy. Well, that guy ain't perfect either. And so an ideal day is essentially, as you just said, it's one day that builds to the next. But when you look for what makes your heart sing and what makes you complete and content, not contemptuous, but content, is going to be unique to you, and you're going to get to build just like a sculptor builds, one pad of clay onto another, and then ends up with something that looks like his version of a man or woman or wildlife or a mountain, whatever it is. It's going to build one upon the next, and I think it's just knowing it's a practice. He sets you up that it's a lifetime. There's no goalpost really that you're trying to achieve. But I just spent some time with my 96-year-old uncle down in Florida when we were there, and I asked him, what's the secret to it all? How do you get to live this long and have your mind with you and everything? He said, Chris, all that matters is family. So at this point in his life, as he's looking backward, he's just looking at those highlights of the family. And I guarantee you his kids gave him some grief over the years. I know them. They're my cousins. I know they gave him grief. But all he thinks about is family at this point. His ideal day today at 96 probably looks different than at 46, but I can guarantee you family's been at the centerpiece of that all this time.
Right. So again, this goes back to that self-reflection and that we keep talking. I mean, there's a common thread in almost every visit that you and I have together, and it always seems to be that self-reflection, that self-inventory, that self-analysis of, who am I? What do I want? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my goals? And then building on that. That seems to be, like you said, there's nothing, the scriptures, there's nothing new under the sun, right? But it always comes back to that. And in fact, most self-help books that I've ever read always come back to taking that analysis of yourself. And I think the problem is that most people instinctually are not self-reflective. It's something that they have to train up in them. It's not a habit that they have. I mean, most people don't want to, you kind of avoid looking at yourself because you're a failure and you're trying, in many ways, and that's what sticks out to you instead of the good stuff.
Joan Didion had a quote from an essay in the 60s that says, "The willingness to accept responsibility for one's own life is the source from which self-respect springs." And I think that's what it comes down to, is when you set up this ideal day, take responsibility for what got you here to where you are today, and then where do you want to go tomorrow? And it is that self-reflection that you and I talk about quite a bit. And I think in this fast-paced world, it's harder and harder to carve out those moments of just sitting quietly with your own thoughts, with yourself, and saying, wait a minute, what do I want my life to look like? This may not be the perfect job you're going to get to at 8 or 9 o'clock this morning. Maybe it's not your ideal job. but what's an ideal day for you? Are you going to wait to live that ideal life until such time you have the perfect job? That may never come along. If you're found growing right where you are and living to the fullest where you are with what you've got, that's when the next best thing will appear in your life. But I think it does take that moment to sit with yourself and envision walking tall into the fullness of life, an ideal life starting today, and it can be repeated every day.
Chris Story, author of the book, The Backyard Millionaire, Born to Live, Making of Man. I mean, he's got a whole bunch of stuff going on out there. If you haven't checked him out, you can find him on Amazon or his books on Audible as well. And, of course, you can find out all about him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Final thoughts, Chris?
Michael, I know you may not make it down, but on Friday night, I have a First Friday exhibit of the first sculptures that I've ever presented to the public at the Art Shop Gallery. First Friday in Homer. Maybe you and Mrs. Dukes come down.
All right. Well, we'll see what we can do. That might be, maybe.
I'll take you to dinner.
You'll take me to dinner. Okay. See, now you're tweaking me up about it. All right, my friend. Well, thank you for coming on board. As always, it's great to talk with you, and we appreciate your thoughts and insights today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, folks. We are out of time. We're going to continue. We've got one final segment dead ahead, and we're going to pick things up with you, the listeners, on the other side. Now that we've gotten that uplift, I needed that. It's kind of hard to shift gears. Maybe we should move Chris to the end of the segment so we can always end on a high note. But I'm going to open up the phone lines. Whatever you want to talk about. There was some criticism in the chat room that I was that I was beating down on somebody or running him down or doing whatever. Whoever your candidate is, come on and tell me why. I'm fine with that. I've got no problem. Tell me who you are going to vote for out of the 48 different candidates that are there. I'd love to hear what you have to say, what your thoughts are on it. Feel free to jump on board. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We're going to be back with more right after this.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. In the break right now, and we're ready to go. Let me see what else we got here. Supreme Court just confirmed, did they? Decision, Roberts, blah, 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 blah. Opinion, end of row. I don't see anything verifying that as of yet, but I'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Harold, for bringing that up. Take Michael Dukes and Mrs. out for dinner. Oh, that would be twisting my arm. Oh, well, you don't feel free to take me out and my wife out to dinner anytime. I received my ballot in the mail yesterday, said Chris, and so did Greg. He mentioned it, and I did as well. I got all the ballots in the mail yesterday, so that's good. And don't go into debt unless it's absolutely necessary, says Hawk. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that for sure. You don't, unless you absolutely have to go into debt, that is probably a good call. I personally have eliminated almost all debt from my life, and it is definitely a load off when you don't have to think about those things. That is definitely important. It's a good piece of advice. Dave Ramsey was right. Holy cow. Yeah, I know. Exactly. Perfect morning for Hawk is waiting on the sun to rise on the Kasilof Flats and all those birds coming to life. It's amazing if you ever go to a bird sanctuary. It's like the whole earth is coming alive. That sounds like a beautiful thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Two of my favorite recollections of my perfect morning. I remember one when I was about, I must have been 18, of being on deck of a boat in the Bering Sea, This would probably be January, being on deck, and cold, breeze, medium sea, and then watching the sun come up over the horizon. That was an amazing day that still sticks with me to this day. That morning, cold, wet, tired, just finished a halibut opener, I think. I was on a commercial fishing boat. We were way out in the Bering Sea down on the Aleutian Chain. And I just remember standing on deck and watching that sun come up. And this would have been, dark 30, because this was late summer. No, it was January. So, because I was there in January. I don't remember the time of year now, but I remember watching the sun come up. Regardless of what time of year it was. What stuck with me was, wow. And then I had something similar one morning when I lived on Maui a couple of years later, and watching the sun come up over Molokini Crater was again another one of those just absolutely amazing. I had a picture of it. I actually took a picture of that. I had my camera with me at the time, and on a tripod, and I was taking photos of the sunrise, and just the peace of the waves and the quiet and nobody else out. That's a perfect morning. Anyway, amazing. All right. Let's see. I'm still going through the comments here. We're going to take your calls and everything else, but you're safe. It's not really confirmed until Michael Dukes finds the ruling. No, that's not what I was saying. Well, whatever. I had read this morning, as of 2 hours ago, that the Supreme Court was still refusing to confirm that the leak was from them. In fact, they were issuing a no comment. So if you've got the link to that, Harold, where they confirmed it, send it over to me. I think it's interesting. I mean, they may eventually do that, or they may have done it, and I just haven't seen it. No big deal. We got ours, but they are different. Names in different orders. That's the way they're supposed to be, Sandy. They randomize the names at the beginning of the ballot. So I think there's 3 or 4 different versions of the ballot out there. And, they randomize the names at the top of the ballot. I missed the first hour of the show. Have we talked about all the extra ballots that have been sent to people that notified the division of election they moved years ago? Do we just go to the state troopers for that information? Can we file a report for fraud with the strollers against Vale and Meyer against the stroller? I don't know. Yes, we have talked about it. And Must Read actually has some pictures of it. So, it's there. Also sounds beautiful, Michael. Oh, yeah, both of them. Both of those sunrises. I mean, that was a perfect morning. I mean, it would have been better if I'd had a cup of coffee in my hand and maybe my wife there to share it with me. But I wasn't married at the time. So I'm just thinking of that's the perfect. You know what the perfect morning would be? Being able to sleep in as late as I want, and just as I get up, the sun rises. That would be the perfect morning. Of course, I'd have to go to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to make that happen. But, maybe one day I'll have the perfect morning where I could sleep in as much as I want and then wake up just as the sun peaks up. All right. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for coming in. I tell you what, we're just going to open up the lines. I was going to say we had to talk about whatever we talked about today, but I'm feeling adventurous. What do you want to talk about? Let's do that. I was saying earlier, if you want to talk with us about who you're going to be voting for in the upcoming special election with all the ballots that are arriving in the mailboxes, right now, I'd love to hear it. I mean, whether it's somebody that I'm voting for or not, that is your choice. I got to be honest, in the primary, I haven't decided yet. I'm torn. I'm torn to be voting between Chris By, who is the Libertarian candidate, and Nick Begich. Those are my two choices, and it's a coin toss at this point as to which one. I feel like Chris By needs my support more to see if he can get onto the ranked choice voting ballot. I think Nick is probably going to make it to the final four anyway, but I haven't decided. I haven't decided yet which one I'm going to be to do it. So you feel free to tell me who you are rooting for. We had earlier Jeremy called in and said he was going to be supporting Sarah Palin. Great. I know somebody else told me the other day that they were going to support John Coghill, and I was like, "Well, you're right. Tell me why," because I just wanted to know. I mean, why would you? Oh, he's 70, whatever he is, years old, and all the things that he's done on top of that, and well, he's a statesman, Okay. But yeah, I just want to know. I just want to know. Somebody just asked in the chat room, Chris By, why Chris? I like Chris's. I like his attitude. I like his positions on policy. I like the fact that he has not been part of the political world, which in part is also one of the reasons why I'm attracted to Nick Begich, because he's not held political office. He has been more involved in the political world than Chris By has, because he was part of the Republican, one of the leadership committees or things like that. But he's not soaked in it like a lot of the candidates are. But I like Chris By because, again, he is a small L libertarian, and he and I probably hold more views in common than I do with Nick Begich. But like I said, it's still a toss-up. It is, it's an interesting point. And like I said, I'm going to rank in the top four. It's going to be, it's definitely going to be, Nick Begich and Sarah Palin, and then whoever else is in there that I feel can do a good job. If they all make it to the end there. Hawk says in the chat room, he says he's supporting Sarah Palin because she was instrumental in taking over both houses of Congress in 2010 with the formation of the Tea Party. She was a big part of that. I would not disagree with that. But that was 12 years ago. That was a long time ago. So I think that there's been some things in between that has kind of weaned me off her as a candidate personally. But everybody's welcome to go do that. 433-3150, 433-3150 if you want to sound off. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good morning, Michael. This is Mike, and I'm in Fairbanks.
Morning, Mike.
So I heard you were trying to decide between two candidates, so I'll put my 2 cents worth in.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, if you believe in conservative principles, then at this point, we need to vote for a strong conservative. Since we only get one pick on that primary vote, I guess each of us needs to decide, but we need that strong and well-supported conservative to get into the main deal so they get into Washington. There are candidates I would like to maybe vote for, but I don't feel that their chances are that good. So in my case, I think Begich is the strong candidate, so that's who I'm going to put down on this primary. Okay, I'll let you go. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike. No, I think he's a good candidate. I definitely do. I think he's a good candidate. I think he's got lots of pluses amongst the Republican candidates that are on the ballot. I think that he is the strongest choice, but that's just me. I would, but I think, this is part of the problem with libertarians in general, is that I don't think that people take a look at them in total to see that most of their values. In talking with Chris By, and I've had several conversations with Chris By as well. We've talked to him here on the program, and then I've met with him face to face as well. He's got conservative values. Again, smaller, more limited government, getting government, out of the decision-making process of many things. And wants to fight for Alaska. I think that those are all good qualities, as well as his positions on, national defense and Second Amendment rights and borders and things like that. So, like I said, it's a toss-up. But, yeah, you're right. You only get one choice during this election. You only get one out of the 48 to choose from. Now, when it comes time to the broader vote on the general, you'll have whoever the top four are. And I would bet dollars to donuts that in the top 4 will be Sarah Palin and Nick Begich, probably Al Gross, and maybe, I don't know who the 4th wild card candidate, maybe a Chris By, maybe if he gets enough attention, maybe not, I don't know. Maybe an Adam Wool or a Chris Constant. Maybe it's a pretty equal split of 2 and 2, conservative and liberal. I don't know. But I can pretty much guarantee that, I can't remember who said it. I think it was Jim Lotzfeld or somebody who said, Sarah Palin, now that she's announced, could take a nap on the couch and still make it to the Final 4. I think she will. I think she's got the name recognition. Maybe Santa Claus makes it. I don't know at this point. But we'll see what happens with that. 433-3150, 433-3150. Is the number if you would like to sound off and come on board. Henry or David in the chat room says the 4th will either be a Republican or a Libertarian. That's what I predict. Well, it could be. There's a ton of undeclared and independents and all those kind of things. There's a ton of stuff in there as well. A baggage was the vote in Congress that brought us Obamacare. It's concerning that all unions are giving money and supporting behind lovey-dovey. It's a different baggage, but I know a lot of people are going to be concerned about Nick simply because of his name. He came on here last week and discussed that. I personally, I don't have a problem thinking that I'm not worried about him going over to the dark side at the last minute, but I know that there's a lot of people that are simply because of the name. But we all know. We all know that there are many times when a family has a black sheep, whether it's a liberal family with a conservative black sheep or it's a conservative family with a liberal black sheep. We all know that happens. So I'm not so concerned about the name as many people are, it appears, anyway, to me. All right, well, we're out of time for today. That actually leads us right to the end. Holy cow. All right. We're going to see you guys tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow, but we will have something good. I know that Mike Shower is going to be joining us in hour 2. That's the plan anyway. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have more information on SB 39. Maybe some information on SB 199. I don't know. We'll have to watch out for that. You'll just have to show up and find out. How about that? That's what'll have to happen. Thank you, my friends. We appreciate you joining us. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind to one another. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you tomorrow, my friends. Have a great day. Okay, my friends. Well, enjoy whatever weather you've got. Sunshine, rain, no snow or sleet, I hope. We will see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate you coming in and joining us. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.